Hello humans, I am the Black Cat and welcome to Movie Review Monday. This week we take a look at Seed of Chucky. The Seed of Chucky was released in 2004, directed by Don Mancini, who also wrote all the Chucky movies, starring Jennifer Tilly as Tiffany and Jennifer Tilly, Brad Dourif as Chucky, Billy Boyd as Glen and Glenda, Redman as Redman, Hannah Spirit as Joan, and John Waters as Pete Peters. Okay, so it's getting harder and harder to avoid spoilers, so if you haven't seen Bride of Chucky, you may be a little confused because Seed of Chucky is a direct carry-on from Bride of Chucky. So, spoiler warning for the ending of Bride. So basically, in Bride of Chucky, Chucky and Tiffany, how should I put it, express their affection for each other physically, resulting in Tiffany giving birth at the end of the movie. That union resulted in the introduction of Glen, or Glenda. Glen or Glenda being an obvious reference to the Ed Wood movie of the same name, about a man who likes wearing women's clothes. Okay, so they mostly refer to Glen as Glen throughout the movie, so I'll do that too. So the story goes that Glen is discovered in the cemetery, where he was left, by a guy who uses him in kind of a sideshow as a ventriloquist act. But he's not very nice to Glen. Glen sees Chucky and Tiffany on TV and realizes they're his parents because Chucky has the same Made in Japan brand on his arm that Glen has. That raises the first question. Why does Chucky's brand say Made in Japan when we all know that he was actually made at the PlayPal factory? So that seemed a bit weird to me. Anyway, so he escapes in order to find them. Meanwhile, the real Jennifer Tilly is acting in a movie with the Chucky and Tiffany dolls. Jennifer is tired of not being taken seriously as an actor and tries to seduce Redman, who is a rapper who's about to direct his first movie. So Glen finds them and he essentially wakes them up. They decide that they're going to be a family and hatch a plan to have Tiffany possess Jennifer Tilly, conveniently enough, and Chucky is going to possess Redman's body. But they also need a body for Glen. So they decide it would be a good idea to impregnate Jennifer with Chucky's seed. Besides that plan, one of the main themes running through the movie is Glen's struggle with his identity. He explains that he's not sure if he's a boy or a girl and feels like he's both. Or some days he feels like a boy and some days he feels like a girl. Tiffany is accepting of this, of course, but Chucky doesn't like it and wants him to be a boy. Another aspect of his identity is that he's struggling with the killer instinct that he has inherited. The Glen side of him feels that killing is wrong, but the Glenda side has no problem with killing at all and is pretty psycho. So once in the presence of Chucky and Tiffany, he's forced to confront this conflict. Chucky likes to kill. Tiffany also likes to kill, but she's a bit more understanding and compassionate and tries to quit for Glen's sake. So the male side of him is more like Tiffany, and the female side is more like Chucky, in a sense. Much like Bride of Chucky, the look of this movie is very colourful and is presented in a more comical style. Chucky and Tiffany look a lot more doll-like in a way. The bright colours make Chucky's plastic face seem to stand out more. While they still heavily rely on puppetry, in this movie there seems to be more use of CGI than they've used before. Either that or the CGI in this movie was so bad that it was very obvious when it was used. As I said in the Bride of Chucky movie review, the use of CGI wasn't distracting and it blended with the scenes really well. It complemented the scenes that it was used in. But with this movie, it really stood out, and not in a good way. There was one effect that was largely CGI that did look okay, and that was a kill scene where someone had acid on their face, and there was a nice shot of his skin melting away. But when CGI was used for Chucky walking or Glen running, it just didn't blend well. It's like when someone uses a green screen, you can always tell that they're using it. There's a couple of shots that I really like in this movie, both of them being extreme close-up of eyes, when Chucky shows his true nature and when Jennifer's eyes turn green. The eyes show so much expression, especially with Chucky. I don't know how they managed to make a doll's eyes so expressive, but it's really effective. So with this movie, from discussions that I've come across online, there has been some discussion about Glen's or Glenda's identity. Whether they're trying to represent someone who is transgender or gender fluid in a way. But I did see a comment somewhere, I can't remember now, where somebody mentioned that it was actually two souls in one doll body, which is how they were able to put him into separate bodies in the end. I think that sounds more practical, because if somebody was transgender spiritually, they wouldn't be able to be split into two separate bodies, because they would still just be one soul. But if they were two separate souls in one body, then they could be split into two souls. Similar to Bride of Chucky, there is some references to other movies in Seed, not as much as there was in Bride, but they're still worth mentioning. Right at the beginning, Glen's inner dialogue talks about how he's not a violent person, and when a fly lands on his hand, he says that he wouldn't hurt a fly. This, I felt, was a reference to Psycho.
I'm not like that at all. I wouldn't even hurt a fly.
And they'll say, why, she wouldn't even harm a fly.
Which, if you haven't seen Psycho, I highly recommend it. It's a true classic, and you know what they say.
A true classic never goes out of style.
But if you have seen it, you'd get the connection there. Then, of course, there's this scene.
I can't think of a thing to say.
Here's Johnny!
Yeah, I don't think I need to tell you where that's from. There's also a weird scene that involves what is meant to be Britney Spears. It's not actually Britney Spears, obviously. Why that was included, I'm not 100% sure. Were they trying to make some kind of statement? I don't know. I tried to look up when Britney Spears had her controversies involving driving, but apparently that was a couple of years after this movie came out. But at the time that this movie came out, Britney Spears was at the height of her popularity, so maybe that's why. It was a bit weird to have that scene in there. There seems to be a deliberate change in the movie styles that seem to coincide with Chucky's changing motives. The first three movies, the Child's Play movies, with Andy and his relationship with Chucky, the Bride and Seed of Chucky movies, and later the Cult and Curse of Chucky, all have different looks and feels about them. And I can't help but notice that the style changes when Chucky's motives change. For example, the Child's Play movies were all about Chucky pursuing Andy. Once he gave up on that idea, the style changed. Then with the introduction of Tiffany and Chucky becoming a family man, this new style ends with this movie, Seed of Chucky. At the end of the movie, his motives change again. It's another transition for Chucky personally, and the last two movies have a different style altogether, which we'll get to eventually. So basically, without wanting to give too much away, even though everybody's probably seen it already by now, Chucky has a change of perspective by the end of this movie. Like I said in my Bride of Chucky review, I think Jennifer Tilly was a great addition to the franchise. Tiffany is a good counter to Chucky's character. They're very similar, but they're also complete opposites. Chucky is a cold-blooded killer. Tiffany is too, but she also has some level of empathy. So, would I watch it again? Yes, absolutely. Personally, I really liked both Bride of Chucky and Seed of Chucky. I would say these two movies are probably my favourites of the whole franchise. I just really love cheesy, campy horror, and I think these movies did a great job of representing that. But anyway, that's all from Movie Review Monday for this week. Let me know what you think of this movie in the comments, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!